One thing we haven't really covered in any of the tutorials so far are the use of billboards or alpha planes. And we're going to go ahead and load one of those in right now, and we can take a look and see how they work. If we go up here to our primitive objects and hold that down, we can go all the way up to the last object, which is an alpha plane, which also works as a billboard if you wanted to. Immediately we have this window, our alpha plane options, which gives us the ability to add a color picture. Because what we have is a plane that will either stay in the same position, or we can turn it on a billboard, which means it will always face the camera regardless of where the camera is facing and where it's positioned. So that way we could add trees or things like that onto an object, image sequences of explosions, anything like that where you want to incorporate it in the scene. So we'll just go ahead and just load in an image. Okay, now the image I have loaded in here is actually an X-Frog billboard. Because the Xfrogs collections come with billboards, so you can use these with your alpha planes to create trees, and that will speed up your rendering process if you are going to have a fixed position for a camera. This is a good method of doing it. And one of the nice things too is you load in one TIFF image, which automatically has our alpha plane built in. So you load in one file and it'll automatically load in both of these. Let's just go ahead and click OK right now, and I'm going to drop this object, and let's take a look at it in the scene. You can see we don't have billboard on right now, so it is just a flat plane. But we can see we have a realistic looking tree image on there without having to actually have a real tree. And you'll see that if I go ahead and render this really quick, this is at final rendering settings, this will render very quick and a lot quicker than an actual object would. So let's let that finish out. Okay, and now let's take a look at the actual billboard effect. Let's click on billboard, and we can also have the ability to keep it vertical. Keep vertical we'll keep that checked on right now, and I'll show you in a sec how that works. But right now, as you can see, no matter how we position the camera, it is always facing the camera. And it also reacts with the light in that way. So if we move it off to the side, it will darken up. Move it around, facing it, and then we have that nice light on there. But you'll notice too, once we move upwards, that we kind of see our two-dimensional plane, and we lose some of that 3D look to it. And that's what the keep vertical is for. Right now we're keeping it vertical so that it stays vertical. It's pretty obvious, but we'll double click on it and turn that off. And right now we have an alpha plane that will always face the camera in the same direction. No matter where we position this camera, it will always face it. So we can rotate around on the sides, we can go upward, and it will always face the camera. So you can do this with lots of different things. Animated sequences, a lot of people like to use alpha planes for animated people, where you can go and start from a higher degree angle, more of a perspective, and actually have a sequence of people walking, and then you can incorporate that into your scene. So alpha planes are pretty neat and pretty powerful in that way. There's also other things you could do with them, like explosions. If you have an explosion sequence, you can add that to it and create sort of a little explosion while kind of putting that inside of your scene, and break up your objects accordingly. But it's a neat little tool and object that you can use within your scenes for tons of different things. You could also make your own alpha planes. So let's go ahead and actually just make our own alpha plane right now, which is actually fairly simple. Let's say you have a tree. We'll go ahead and we're just going to use a tree as an example. And we'll just use our Mexican palm tree. And let's say we have a still animation where we want to have a bunch of these in the scene, but we're short on time and we need to get it rendered right away. So we don't want to have to wait for every single frame to render, or a long frame to render with hundreds and hundreds of trees. Well, we can use alpha planes. So we want to position our camera where we find a good view for our tree, because we're going to be creating a color map and alpha map out of that. And this looks like it should be good. Next we're going to go to the atmosphere. We're going to load an atmosphere. And I'm going to go to Effects, Other, and load No Atmosphere, just to get that out of the way. And then I'm also going to delete our ground plane. Now depending on your light position, you might want to change that just a little bit so we can light up our plant a little bit better. And I'll just move that into position so we have some decent lighting on here. And now I'm going to go ahead and just render that. And that rendered fairly quickly. And now what we can do is actually save this as a color map, and then go ahead and actually display our alpha and save that alpha map and load those up into the Billboard. So I'm going to go ahead and save these right now. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and just create a new scene. I'm going to go back to pretty much our default sky, and not going to save. And now I'm going to load it onto their alpha plane. And the color picture is the one I'm going to save that we just rendered. And then the alpha plane is the alpha image that we just saved. Okay, now we've loaded in the appropriate image maps. And actually what we have to do is invert our alpha picture so that this shows up clearly. But one thing you'll notice is that it's being squished. Alpha planes are typically square, and the way we rendered it was actually not square. So keep in mind, one thing you'll have to go back and do if you are going to actually create your own alpha planes is you want to render it so that we have sort of a square image. So we pretty much go back, and if you want to redo it, just load in that tree, set it up, delete the ground plane. You can remove the atmosphere if you want. It won't throw off our alpha at all. But just go in and set up a different type of render. We can set up to square, so it's 1 to 1. I'm going to render to screen, and I'm going to do 600 by 600. Click render, and this will give us a square render, and that we can use that without any distortion within the alpha plane. So all you got to do is save each one of these images, save out the color, and then save out the alpha. You might run into a little problems with some of the leaves on some of the plants, where they won't quite be transparent because the alpha plane might not match up. You can touch it up in a photo editing program if you want, but all you gotta do is just save the color, click to the alpha, and we can save that. And we'll close that out. So there's a lot you can do with alpha planes.